Hi and welcome guys to another little tutorial. Now today we are going to talk about camera perspective and things like that with cameras. Now there's quite a few ways that you could do a lot of different things with cameras. We are going to talk about calling and how the GPU kind of works to do its job in our little kit that we're creating. Now the concept could be used in various other ways. But this is kind of one of the first stepping stones to further tutorials to go into this. So it will get more harder as we go by. So this will be one of the camera. I'm going to put this as part 1. Working with cameras, part 1. And I don't know how much more we're going to get into it, unless there's a little high demand and things like that. But for the most part, we are going to talk about how we use cameras. Now, cameras by themselves have this little rack here, this little square thingy. You might notice these white little lines. I don't know if you can see it on the YouTube video, but they are, if you've ever worked with cameras and you've seen them, this is how far the camera can go in its little rack. And you have a far clipping plane and near clipping plane. Okay. In our, why is it only giving me this? Oh, it's giving me that ocular calling thing. Okay. So we have our little gun, and we have a specialty camera designed only to render the gun. Now we got this near clipping plane. If we turn it up, like so, we can see our gun. It clips. It goes invisible in certain spots. Because it's so close to the camera, it doesn't know what to do. So we usually turn the near clipping plane to like 0.01 or something like that. And our far clipping plane is for how far can this camera see. Well, this only does the weapon. It doesn't care about anything else. So the clipping plane doesn't matter for this part. Okay. And then we got our view rack, which we can make our view go elsewhere. Like, you can do some funny stuff with it. Okay. Now, I'm going to put this back to normal because we're not going to be dealing with that yet. And you can also make your view look really weird too. Okay. So you can do some cool stuff with camera. And then you got your field of view, which you can make it closer or a little bit further or whatnot. I tend to keep this at 60 because it's kind of, it's not really that bad looking when it's at 60. So why are we having this video and why am I wasting your time and watching it? Well, it's simple. I have a little script that's going to tell you how to do stuff with calling. And what calling basically is whenever this camera needs to render an object based on this view rack. You know, your camera clipping plane stuff. Okay? The projection of it. Well, it kind of stinks because anything that's in this clipping plane right here gets called and gets sent to the GPU. My example is take some of the levels in, what would be a good one? Let's say Halo 1 for Xbox. Everyone's played it, everybody knows, and all that cool stuff. The first level, you're in this little ship, and it's a bunch of little rooms and stuff like that. Well, it makes no sense. Even if there's a wall, let's say halfway through your clipping plane right here, like there's a wall right in the middle of it, okay? Like right here. Here's my camera, here's the end, here's the wall. Well, calling will do everything, even if you're just staring at a wall. It will basically just render that You can't see it, but in the background, it renders it. It sends it to the GPU, and it does all that cool stuff that you see objects. Well, if you do the occupation calling, it will cut that out and stop at the wall. Anything that if the viewport sees it, like you actually see it, it renders it. Now this is part of the Unity. It used to be a pro feature. Now I believe it's a pro feature back in the day, but you can actually bake perimeters into the level. If your level is not procedurally done, you can use this bake tab just like you would the navigation and get that functionality in there. Basically, it takes the mesh renders. If you can't see it, it tells it, hey, shut off. Now, it doesn't shut off the script. It just shuts off the mesh render itself. So, it helps with that, And the thing about it is, it's nice. It works really well, and it will help your frames per second. So if you can't see it, it will not send it to the GPU. It turns it off, and there you go. Well, there's another function that you can do that's not so advertised. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you have this box, okay? This box right here in my viewport right here, this little one, I'm using the new Unity one that's got zoom in its viewport. It's really kind of nice, but it's one of the newer functions in Unity 5.4 or something like that, somewhere around there, I believe. But anyway, this box right here, I put this on the UI layer. Okay, just as an example. Now, this I can see perfectly fine. Well, what if it was all the way down there where I could barely see a dot? Well, the problem with the camera stuff and everything else is, even though it's in my clipping plane right here, it renders it. Okay? I'll still have it in my rendering right here, like at the very, very edge. But let's say I have a wall right here. Well, if I don't have that calling stuff that's baked into the level, then it renders it. And that kind of sucks because, well, I don't need it. Not yet. Not until I get up closer. So this is where my new little experimental script comes into play. Okay, I have this set up where I've got a distance right here of 10. If I'm within 10 units, 10 of the Unity distance thingies, okay, it will put this into the level. Now, watch what happens when I put this to 1, and I will do update my camera. It disappears. And you're like, well, how is this useful for me? Well, here's the thing. Let's say in each one of those little rooms in Halo, you have all these little tiny objects, like little beakers and experimental stuff and things like that. Well, you got a high vertex count because they're small and they have, like, they're detailed models. Well, in the calling functionality, you can get this feature to work really, really well because you baked it into the level. But what happens if this is a procedural level and it spawns into the world and you can't bake it like that? Then you're like, oh man, this function stinks because I can't use it. Well, this is where this comes into play. The distance between the actual objects that you need, and then you have, between the door and everything else, how far you can see. Well, using this function right here, which you can call one time, and it will set up all those distance variables. Okay, so if I put this back up to 10 and then update, boom. You could do this at start as well. So every single one of these floats is part of my layers, which is the built-in layers. These are all the layers that I'm using right now. Just one for weapon, and then this stuff. Okay? Well, you know, you're like, well, this is kind of cool. Well, whatever the layer is, you have a float value for. Now, because this has 32 layers in the inspector, when you go to this, you have to have 32 here. There's no way of getting around below it. Okay? Which, you know, I mean, that's not that big of a deal. But, you know, you set up your layers and your distances. Let's say, you know, you want to see some trees, but you only want to go so far. You know what I mean? Like, let's say, I don't know, 300 of it, you know, 300 units, that's pretty far away. So, like, within 300, you can have a higher vertex count, and also you can also use your LOD system. So you'll never notice that the vertex count is, you know, a lot higher than you actually thought. So you can get a lot more detail into your game. And this distance stuff right here, which is cool, is it goes per camera. So you can have it on one camera or two or whatever. But, you know, using multiple cameras is performance heavy. That's one of the reasons why I'm researching into. I know you can use a shader to make our gun show up on top of everything else. It has to do with the rendering order and stuff like that. Overlays. I know there's a shader that you could work with and do stuff like that for. So it's just one of those things, you just have to mess with it and fix it. But getting into shaders is a language that I just don't like. I don't like it. I just don't. And two, they're supposed to be changing some of it as well. So, like I said, I thought this merited a video for the distance stuff, because this is our default thing. So we can have, oh, and this also works for skin mesh renders, everything. It's just doing per layer distance checks. So we can stick up here and put 300. Anything that's in the default layer, we'll do it like 300 units. Okay, that's cool, right? And, you know, then there's another one and another one, you know. And you just go through all your layers that you're actually using and set up distance. Matter of fact, I don't even think you have to have this script actually on. Once it's set and this camera never gets changed or nothing like that, you could pretty much just have it right here. It could be like a kind of an editor thing, because I think it's pretty permanent. So yeah, I thought this was really cool functionality. And, you know, I was also looking into bringing more higher res stuff into play. You know, like higher res gun here and higher detail in the actual you know, actual levels and stuff like that. But this distance stuff right here is actually going to help a lot, because we can set up a layer right here. Room items. Okay? And this room items, we could set it up. So this would be probably, what, 8 or 9 in our check thing? Okay. 8 or... no, it'd be 8. Anything that's inside of the rooms, it will straight up be only available and 100 units. So automatically, when we do little tiny items, we can put it in room items, and if they're not within 100 units, which is actually pretty far. I mean, come on, it's like pretty far. 100 units. I think our field of view is only 60, so I think we're only seeing what, like 60 units or something like that. But anyway, and we update, boom. It never looks like it's checked in there because I have it automatically turned to false. That way it's not running like constantly in the editor, stuff like that. But you're probably wondering, well, it's probably going to be some complex script and stuff like that, and you're like, this is going to be scary hard. Do not worry, it's not scary hard. It's actually the most simple script I think I have in my entire channel. Okay? The simplest. Okay? So how do you want to look at this? Okay? Well, the distance thing and everything else, let's look at the code for it. Boom. Look at that. It is, you don't, well, yeah, you kind of need that. I'm not going to lie. Don't need that. That was for something else. Boom. So I put this in execute as edit mode. You'll get an error if you don't have the camera filled in beforehand, but ignore the error and just go, hey, guess what? Shut up. And, you know, just clear it. After that, you won't have a problem with it. But, public bool, make sure it's false at the beginning. Well, actually, I don't think it matters because even if it's true. And then you put a public float, and it's an array of float, okay? And start, distance equals camera.callDistance, okay? And we have an update here. Now, because we've got execute in edit mode, this lets us do it in the editor with the little bool check, you know, and you can sit there and adjust it and all that cool stuff. But if update camera equals true, then we do this function. Now, this camera is our camera that we put in there, and then layer calling distance equals the distance, our float array here, okay? And that's it. That's it. Simple as can be. So every time you make a change, you just hit the little bool and it will update. Because how the update works in the editor, it only updates when there's a change to the script, and certain other things will fire off an update. It doesn't work like you think, okay? So it's kind of one of those things that you just have to remember to hit the bool and it will do things. Now this works in game. After you, this actually will execute perfectly fine when the game is compiled and sent for whatever reason. When you build it, this update will still run. So this isn't something, you know, that's only for editor and that's it. I could build an editor one, but I didn't see the spending another 20 minutes or a half hour just making an editor script for something that I can just hit a bool and go. So anyway, all it is this little function right here. If you ever worked with the camera, and you've probably seen this and didn't realize how important this could be to your development of your game. Like I said, if the model doesn't have to be rendered unless you're up close to it, you could probably use calling distance and layering to make sure that your GPU isn't overdrawn, like overworked. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at a wall And if somebody drops a gun on the other side, I don't need to render it. I don't even care about it. Unless, I'm in a certain distance, it's not going to matter. It's going to shut the mesh renderer stuff off, and we're just going to go to town with it. Which I think that's fabulous. I am seriously thrilled with that part. Because it's functions like this that would be really nice to use for, optimizing your game. And like I said, if yours is a procedural level and you got AIs running around, like let's say you've got 100 units on your map, okay? And, if they're, let's say, like loads out, like a lot of distance out, you could set up fog to be like within 60 or so, and your field of view could be, well, no, let's say our fog is like 30, okay? Your field of view is 60, so it goes 60 out. There's no reason to have that extra distance with that fog unless it's absolutely necessary at that time. So in between the fog and your distance, you could set up the calling for certain objects to load up in that area. And like I said, when it comes to levels that got lots of rooms and stuff like that, and they've got like highly detailed models, we can use layering to make sure, hey, if we're at least into the door part, the actual door itself, well, if we're that close to the door, we should make sure they're all on, right? Well, if you set it up correctly and stuff like that, with the distance part, you'll never know it was off, and your GPU will benefit big time. Because procedural stuff, this is where this becomes powerful. If it's already sitting in the game itself, then it's not going to be as powerful as the other function, the other calling function that Unity has by itself, okay? Which is this thing, OCCLUSION. It's one of those weird words I don't say every day, so I don't want to freaking murder the word, let's say that.